Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where Fintech leaders join me for a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today's guest is Simon Beitz from Alex.Bank. As CEO, Simon has over 20 years' experience in the retail and business banking space across startups, banking, and tech. He established Suncorp Bank's Innovation Lab and co-founded EML Payments, which is now an ASX-listed payments business. Simon was motivated to start Alex.Bank in 2018 by his belief that consumers deserve fairer and easier banking. Alex.Bank provides a humanized banking experience, which is why he and his co-founder gave the bank a human name to bring back the human touch to banking. In 2023, Alex.Bank is the most awarded new digital bank in Australia and received its full ADI in December 2022. I chat to Simon about the journey he's been on, how Alex.Bank aims to succeed where others have failed, and what a full ADI means for Alex.Bank moving forwards. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dick. It's great to be here.
It is very good to have you here. I'm taken back to a conversation you and I had when we very first met, I think in early 2018, about digital banks. And so it's fantastic to have you here as the recipient of a full ADI. So congrats. This is the first opportunity I've had to congratulate you on that.
Yeah, thank you. We're very excited. As you've alluded to, there's a lot of time and effort to build a bank, and the team's done a terrific job in getting Alex.Bank to where it is today. Although, as I say to my team, the journey's only just begun, Dexter. The license is the first part of it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that journey, but before we do, could you share with the audience just a little bit more about Alex.Bank and kind of, what the big problem is that you're solving?
Yeah, and look, often it's not a big problem. We're taking banking back to the future, Dexter, and sometimes people are a bit surprised by that when they sort of think about other organisations solving big, hairy, audacious problems. We think banking should be simple, and we think customers are often looking for simple solutions in banking. So we're removing the friction, putting fairness back into banking, and that's sort of played out by giving interest rates back on customer accounts that haven't had interest for a while, or removing fees that seem unfair and unreasonable, or penalising customers for paying loans back early. So, as Australia's newest challenger bank, which is 100% digital, we're just challenging the status quo and saying, how do we remove that complexity? Price customers for risk. So we think if customers are behaving well and doing the right thing, then they should absolutely get better pricing and fairer pricing from us. And having easy to understand terms and conditions, which enable customers to get a fast, flexible banking product, whatever it is, whether it's a loan from Alex.Bank or a term deposit from Alex.Bank. And we're finding our customers are loving it.
I remember the conversation that you and I had where we were talking about core banking systems and the legacy technology, and even the issue that this kind of breed of neobanks at the time were having around, what is the core banking system that you're going to use? With all of that in mind, like what is the kind of technology behind Alex.Bank, and how is this going to kind of differentiate from what we've seen previously?
We all need a core banking system. We've decided to go with Terminos Cloud T24 banking system, but we also used Terminos for what we thought it was really good at, and also build our own tech out that enabled us to do the special things that are special for Alex. And so what that means is we're using Terminos as our product ledger today, and that's really important. That gives us and others the confidence that our product ledger is doing what it should be, and interest has been calculated and accrued and charged appropriately. But then the areas where it's really important from a customer experience point of view, we own that technology, and we've built that in the Azure environment. So, Terminos is in Azure, Microsoft Azure environment. We've built beside that the Alex environment, which allows us to control our UX and CX. And as an incredibly impatient CEO, it's important for me that my team can control that customer experience, Dexter, and we're not relying on a large software provider to take their amount of time to change, colors of buttons or customer experience things. So we can do that, and we can do that often the same day we decide to change it before we go home, and that's the power of owning that piece of the technology. We've also built our own proprietary credit decision engine, Alex Intelligence, and Alex Intelligence allows us to make really smart credit decisions extremely quickly, in fact, almost in real time. So, we're declining customers straight away, which a fast no is always a good no.
It is.
And that allows people to move on to someone else. But also with our straight-through processing we've designed, it means that customers are applying for an Alex loan in about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The decision engine is able to do real-time approvals, but currently we're having credit officers look at those real-time approvals. So we're averaging a credit decision in about 10 minutes. And then that auto process then kicks back in where customers are given their documentation to sign via DocuSign and then fund through digital funding. So the fastest end-to-end process we've done on lending, Dexter, I'm pleased to say, has been about 30 minutes, and that's when everything's lined up. And on average, we're seeing our customers taking about 3.5 hours from a start to finish. That compares favourably to the traditional banks, of which I've come out of, where it can be up to 10 days for a personal loan. So our technology's enabled that, and then brokers really important to us as well, Dexter. And so we've built a broker workbench, which allows our brokers to interact with Alex.Bank to make sure their customer experience is also a strong customer experience. And we're really proud with the uptake that the brokers have supported us with and how that's going as well. So that technology, again, is some technology we've built at Alex.Bank.
I'm interested on the kind of building the new credit engine, because one of the frustrations, again, that I have not just with banks, but I think most financial institutions is they seem to be working on these models of assessment that were created in the 1970s, where we all had jobs for life. And kind of now you've got people who are self-employed. You have people who are in the gig economy or the project economy, where they're professionals and they're consultants, and they might do 9 months work and then have a few months break. What have been some of there's been a lot of changes to the way that we live over this last decade. What have been some of those changes that you've seen that you've thought, hey, how do we bring this into a bank that's serving a modern day customer and not some customer archetype that was put together in the 1970s or 80s?
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head about how people are earning money these days through the gig economy as an example. So we don't ask for pay slips in our application process, because pay slips are antiquated. Quite frankly, Dexter, people younger than you and I probably wouldn't even know how to access there or find the pay slip anyway. So through working with a partner, we take a bank feed from the customer's bank account, and that allows us to see their income and how that comes in. And it doesn't matter whether it comes in weekly, fortnightly, monthly, whatever. And it doesn't matter if it's different all the way through either, if you think about a gig economy where there'll be peaks and troughs. So it allows the Alex Intelligence system to understand what the income looks like. It doesn't matter if it's variable from different sources. And then it allows us to take a point of view on what that customer is earning. And that's part of a responsible lending decision. So we need to understand what someone earns, and we also need to understand what people spend money on. We've been able to do that without those friction pieces. I mean, can you imagine asking someone in the gig economy for their pay slips or records of how they earn money, and they turn up with 10 different pieces of paper and different things like that? I
can't imagine it, because I've just been through it this last week.
Well, it wouldn't work, and quite frankly, to use one of my former CEO's words, it's just dumb to expect people to do things like that. So we've removed those frictions, and you know what? One of the things that warms my heart is when we see our Trustpilot scores coming in at 4.7 out of 5 from a customer experience from that. I think the team's done a marvelous job in building that out.
So you got 2,000 customers so far, I believe.
I think a bit over that now, but yeah.
Fantastic. And what kind of, what's been for you, I guess, the highlight so far of this journey?
Yeah, there's been many highs and lows, Dexter. Building a bank is not easy, and not for the ill-hearted.
I was going to say that. I don't think I had many words of encouragement for you in that first meeting.
And certainly I find it difficult when I'm, someone asks to take me for a coffee and say, hey, I'm thinking about building a bank. Can you give me some advice? And to be fair, sometimes it's been, pack up and go and do something else if you're not of the right type of person. But I've loved my journey, Dexter, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Building a bank is exciting. Starting with a blank piece of paper is exciting. Removing those points of friction that you know as a customer yourself that you've encountered or you've heard firsthand from customers is exciting. I enjoy immensely talking to shareholders and selling our vision and what we're talking about and seeing their reaction. And frankly, I enjoy the interactions with our banking regulator, APRA. I think they're great people and they're really interested in making a difference. But rightly so, they hold a high bar as we want in this country to protect our deposit holders. So, lots of highs. COVID was a challenge for us all, Dexter. Overnight switching to working from home and not being able to interact with people, designing a business remotely is very challenging. I'm an old-fashioned person that likes a whiteboard and having a robust conversation around there. And frankly, as the banking regulator slowed down license applications through that, and COVID cost us roughly 18 months of time. But we didn't waste that time either in Alex.Bank, which I think is also important. We've got a great habit in Alex of turning setbacks or knocks into positives, and that's where we use that time to build out extra products to make sure we did get our license restrictions removed. We were ready to really accelerate and do some interesting things.
Obviously, the capital requirements to have an ADI are quite significant and counterintuitive to the the concept of a tech startup, which is you start lean. You don't need much investment. You can get a product out the door, test, iterate, and kind of lean startup methodology just isn't possible with a digital bank. How have you managed the kind of capital requirements in a tough investment landscape? Australia itself is super tough. Then you've got all the other factors that came into it as well. Plus then you've got others in the space who very publicly have failed. How have you managed to still be here today? I guess it's like, I'm gonna be that blunt, right? Because it is. It's a significant achievement for you to be where you are now.
Yeah, I think it comes down, and I'm asked this question fairly regularly, to be honest, and I think it comes down to grit and determination. My co-founder, and we don't often use that language, but my co-founder Craig Fenwick and I often say you make your own luck. I know I've had a number of conversations with Joseph Healy, the CEO of Judo Bank, and we talk about making your own luck, perseverance. There's a lot of no's and a lot of doors have been closed on you when you're raising money. But there's the ones that, of course, support you and see the vision. So it's about the grit and determination. I never trust my future in anyone else either, Dexter. I think that's a dangerous game when you trust your future in someone else. So I always work closely alongside advisors to ensure we get the right outcomes. As an example, I've just come back, as I mentioned to you before we started, from a trip in the UK and Singapore. I'm on a quarterly rotation globally with investors and potential investors, talking about Alex.Bank, talking about our next milestones, and then going back and telling them that showing them that we've met those milestones or exceeded those milestones. And that's about them getting to know Alex.Bank, the team, and also in that instance, Craig and I, that we deliver on what we say we can. And I think that's really important in any startup. As you mentioned, I've been in EML. We started that, the four of us from start. And again, it was about making sure you deliver on your promises and your commitment. And it's not easy. It's my previous life was much easier than my life at the moment, but the satisfaction is 100 times more here.
That point that you have about being very clear about milestones and then hitting those milestones and using that as I guess one, kind of template to go out and raise capital, but two, then instilling confidence. You're actually the second guest that we've had on the last 3 months who's given that, you use that approach, and they just raised, I think last week, 35 million in a very tough environment.
Yeah.
So it shows, I think, very much, it demonstrates clearly that, there is, there are investors out there, there is money out there, but you have to show, what the money's first of all required for, what you're going to do with it, and what's in it for them. Yeah. It's very simple. It's a very simple kind of psychology, right? But it seems to be lost on people that this is what's required.
Look, 100%, Dexter. And what I can tell you is my lessons, even just from this trip from the UK and Singapore and talking to large investors, is it's the same message around the world at the moment. Regulatory risk is a concern, and people don't want to be caught up in regulatory risk at the moment. So it's really tough if you're just starting out. We're in the fortunate circumstances where we no longer have any regulatory risk. The licensing is all done, and it's about moving forward. Globally, the desire around revenue is back in focus. It's back in vogue where it wasn't a couple of years ago. And Alex.Bank, because we're simple bankers, we always focused on lending led. And when we first met, I think I said to you, we were already starting to get going with our lending product, and so that's really important. And globally, that's what large investors are looking for. Show me that you can actually get a product going and you can get it into market. And we absolutely iterated a number of times that product, to your point before. And yes, it's hard on the capital side from the bank license, but it's not on some of your other product pieces. Yeah. So you've got to work through that. Execution, again, being narrow focused on the execution, Dexter. So, I think some people around the world have made the mistake of trying to please either investors or other people and do too many things at once.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most of those people fall by the wayside because you just can't afford to, in a startup, do everything at once. So, we've always been narrow focused. And we always said, if you saw my first business plan that I raised money off, that we'd be in market with one lending product and one deposit product. Well, we actually, at the time we got our restrictions removed, we had 2 lending products and 2 deposit products, but that's because of COVID that we did an extra one. Because the business of banking is very simple. You match fund your lending with your deposits. So you got to make sure you generate that. And then the last lesson from my recent excursion, which again is not a new one for us, is having profitability in sight. Alex, we will be profitable month on month at the end of this calendar year. All things working as we envisage, and that's really important to have profitability in sight. Particularly, we've been going for some time now, as you mentioned, and investors expect to start to see that.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your background, Simon, and it's a fairly unique background, particularly for a banker. Do you mind sharing with us how you got started, how you went into banking, and a little bit of your kind of backstory?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think, we're all unique, which is I always love a conversation with anyone about how they ended up where they were. I studied business and law and didn't do what my parents wanted me to do and go down the conservative approach. I found myself working for a payments company in early days, which ultimately led to me joining some teams when I was working out of the US in Houston, of all places, with some companies called Fiserv and Zbeck, which sort of is how EML started to come about. We brought back some software back from the US and customized that down here. And EML at the time, Dexter, we still had the old, I don't know if you remember, but the gift cards, the cardboard gift cards. And people thought we were frankly mad when we were talking about gift cards being plastic and being able to monetize breakage and different things like that. And I knocked on every bank's door at the time to try to get someone to support us into the payment rails back then. And interestingly, it was CreditLink, which is now Inju. And CreditLink supported us at the time to build that out. And I still have a great relationship with the folks at CreditLink at the time that have since moved on, that supported us and gave us the opportunity to do that, because it was a huge responsibility back then. And if I can use street language for a second, Dexter, that was when startups weren't cool, right?
Yeah.
And not everyone was talking
I was going to say fintech wasn't a word back then, right?
No, that's right. Absolutely. Makes me feel old, Dexter. And that was an incredibly exciting time. And because of how we were building that was into Singapore, where MasterCard ran head office. MasterCard's got a great presence in Australia now, but back then it was an office of 6 people. Case Quackinack, the CEO of First Data, was the business development manager back then. So, we're talking about some time ago. I then joined Suncorp, and I've had a great career at Suncorp. I was at Suncorp for 13 years. I went for a year R&R, Dexter, and just kept finding interesting programs of work to get involved in, and frankly got the opportunity to work with some really interesting global consulting houses. And that's where, I think I learned a lot. I was at the front through the GFC, navigating Suncorp through there. Craig and I met through the GFC, where Suncorp was a not a deposit funded bank. They were back then a wholesale deposit, a wholesale funded bank. And the GFC, we had to take some debt to market. And that was navigating that through. Those lessons have come into Alex.Bank today, where we're absolutely focused on a deposit funding ratio. So, I think if you're learning lessons all the way through, that's really important. And my last role at Suncorp was head of innovation, and that was a great role that they put me into. And it was frankly because of my time at EML, and also being at Suncorp for such a long time, where I knew the way Suncorp worked and had the trust of the organisation, that they were happy for me to play around with different parts of Suncorp. Yeah. But that was also where it reignited my passion, Dexter. The passion that I had at EML, the passion that maybe I'd lost or had been subdued for a while, that I thought, I want to go and do this again. So I'm very fortunate that I got to meet Craig at Suncorp, and then we got to start Alex, and even more fortunate for the people that we've met on the journey of building Alex.Bank to help create what it is today.
And what did your wife/partner say to you when you decided you were going to quit a fairly cushy job at Suncorp and start a bank?
I don't know if this podcast is rated appropriately for me to use the words my wife said, Dexter. I had 3, or I have 3 children. They are all in school, private school, and like most of us, had a mortgage and all of those sort of things. And my wife, while she's a very supportive and loving person, didn't quite understand why I was doing what I was doing. But you know what? She's been on the journey, and as you know, wives/partners endure a lot of the brunt through that process, right? And frankly, I couldn't have done what I've done without the support of Elaine and my 3 children. And I know Craig would say the same about his partner too. Startup life isn't glamorous. Some nights in the early days, Craig and I worked 24/7, literally sleeping in the office under the desk. Didn't do that at Suncorp. There's a variety of other things we just had to do to make it work.
It's funny, right? Because I have the same conversation with my kids and say, Dad, when are you going to finish work? And say, I've never finished, right? Like my work's just never finished, right? It's kind of, I can take a break, but it's not finished. And I think that's kind of, that would be the way that I would summarize anybody who's a startup, got their own business is, the rest of you can go and have a 4-day work week and, kind of work remote and do all of that stuff. And that's great. But, for a business owner, it's kind of, it's a very different life and very different experience.
It is, absolutely. And I think sometimes, again, whether it's children or people that haven't been exposed to that, sometimes have the misnomer or misconception that it's all glamour and you can walk out whenever you want to, or play golf more or do whatever. The life of a startup or a co-founder is not a lifestyle choice, or a lifestyle choice from spending time on the beach and the golf course. But as I said, I wouldn't change it for the world, Dexter. I've grown personally a lot. I've enjoyed everything we've done through there. And I think also my children have learned some invaluable lessons seeing me do what they've done as well. Alex Twigg, one of our directors, and I think Alex, or have certainly talked to...
Everybody knows Alex.
Alex famously said to Craig and I when the license came through, he said, well, congratulations, you're part of a very small group of people that's built a bank in modern age, enjoy that. I know my family or my children are certainly very proud of the fact that their dad's been silly enough to build a bank.
When things have got tough, and I'm sure there have been some really dark moments over the last 5 years or so, where have you kind of gone for inspiration? Have there been kind of any hacks that you can share, or have there been certain people that you've gone to, or kind of routines that you've got that kind of just help you get perspective again and kind of re-energize and kind of get back in the right frame of mind?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm incredibly fortunate to have Craig as a co-founder. We got to work with each other through the GFC, which was a very tough time for Suncorp, and did work big hours then. So we knew what each other were capable of. And I think, interestingly, Dexter, one of my seed investors, asked Craig and I before they gave us a check for $1 million, what happens when you two have an argument, given today you're 50-50 shareholders in the organisation, which was obviously some time ago. And I said the benefit is we've worked together on and off for some time now, so we know each other. We know what parts of each other's behaviour rubs us up the wrong way or whatever else, but we also know how to get the best out of each other. So in those patches, and you're right, everyone has them, and if they're telling you they don't have them, I think they're frankly lying to you. And so Craig and I've been able to help each other through that. So I think there's really important value in having someone to go with, because it can be lonely at the top, and it's great that I've had the opportunity to do this with Craig. I've also always had great mentors in my career, be it in corporate world or even startup world, and certainly I found the benefit of or the value of a mentor in EML. As my father, my father's not a business person; he's a commercial architect, albeit long retired. And he said to one of his colleagues, who was the managing partner at KPMG, I don't understand what Simon's doing. He needs someone to sort of help bounce things off, and I can't give him that. And so that an incredible gift from my father at an early age of introducing me to a mentor. Sadly, Steve Loney's passed away, but Steve was a very wise person and a wise head. He told me I was doing the wrong thing, Dexter, when I joined the large corporate, and said that'll send you mad. And then he was one of the first checks to invest in Alex.Bank when I said we were starting a bank. He said, I'm glad you've come back to the real world. And so, I think they're important too. And then again, the value in your family. So, I mentioned before Elaine and the kids, they've been incredible. When Dad comes home cranky or irritable, they seem to know when to give Dad the space and also change the topic as well. So, I've been fortunate from those three sort of categories of people that I turn to.
Fantastic. You mentioned something earlier about navigating the GFC, and it resonated with me because pretty much since, if I look, it's probably around about September, October last year, we'd gone through a bit of a lull where, funding had stopped. I think most of my clients were like, hey, let's just hold off on any hiring, which is understandable. But when it came back online and things started to move again, there was this very clear shift in the kind of archetype of persona that they were looking for. Whereas previously it was go and find me the Silicon Valley person who's scaled a business to, deca unicorn. Now it was go and find me somebody who's had experience in the GFC, who can run a P&L properly, grow revenue whilst keeping costs at a minimum, and also understands what it's like to operate in a high interest rate environment, particularly if you're a lending fintech. And it's been really interesting to see kind of, what were for me just, I think we kind of went back to that in 2009 to see now kind of 2022, we'd gone back to that, just back to basics, right? Like, let's just focus on the simple stuff, right? That we can find somebody to do it well. It turns out that, the talent pool has kind of lost a lot of those skills because of the environment that they've been accustomed to over the last 12, 13, 14 years. What's been your kind of sense as to, talent and the skills that are needed to operate in a business like Alex? And, kind of where do you go to find those people?
Yeah, look, that's a really tough question, and I guess that's why you asked it. The challenge is in a startup world is you need great people, and you need people at various levels of experience and leadership to help guide those. But you also need to, as a CEO of a startup, you need to understand the value that team members give you at certain stages, and you need to be okay with people leaving you at different points too.
Yeah.
And so, that was a lesson I learned at EML through the GFC. You're right. People pull their belts in. I don't think today, and this may be an unpopular comment, Dexter, I don't think today is a high interest rate environment. I think this is probably the interest rate environment that you and I are probably used to. And this is the right sort of rates.
It's low compared to 2009, right? It was what, 7%?
Yeah, that's right. So I don't think we're ever going to see 2% rates while you and I are working either, Dick. I think we've seen those and we'll never see those again. So I think in some ways this is back to normal, and we need to be mindful of that. I think we've always had the view around being tight with costs or expenses, and anyone that works with me at Alex will tell you that. Yeah. They often joke about us at Alex about how tight we are with expenses. Craig, our CFO, is known to turn up with some pens from a hotel conference and put them in the pen cupboard type thing. And I think that's really important because that goes to the ethos or how we think about managing expenses. Yeah. And our shareholders, they pay dividends in expense control and management. I remember back when we first met, Dexter, and people were lining up talking to APRA about bank licensing. And I think I might have told you this story. The GM of licensing, Melisande, said to us, she was asking about how, when we were thinking about revenue and what we were looking at there, and she almost fell off a chair when we said we're trying to be revenue focused and break even as soon as possible. And she said, "Wow, everyone else is talking 5 or 10 years out." Yeah, it's just the way we're wired. And I think I've worked for some great organisations that have always been focused around making sure the business case makes sense, the costs are managed. And again, that's, my reference before around they're the lessons I'm hearing out of all the big funds globally at the moment when they're looking on who they're investing in. It's around cost management and, none of that waste or whatever that we saw a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And I think, look, not to kind of go, digging up, the kind of the past, but I think one of the things that really startled me was, even speaking to investors and in the neobank space, is they hadn't made a distinction between cost per user, as in somebody downloading the app, and cost per home loan or acquisition.
Yes.
2 massively different costs, right? Yeah, the cost of a home loan is it's significant, right? Yeah. And I think these were just kind of like simple things that just weren't being everybody got it, I guess, excited by the promise rather than, hey, what's the practical execution of this?
Absolutely. And I think there was some tremendous ideas and energy. And, sadly, we've lost some of that where it's a shame we couldn't bottle some of that up and use that in different places or whatever. But at the end of the day, we live and die by the dollar. And it's important to make sure that, you're accountable for that, and you can ultimately make money. I've got some great investors, but I also know that they're not prepared to support us forever. They want to see us to make money, and then ultimately for them to see a return on their investment at some point as well, which they're entitled to. That's their business. Yeah.
What's been really interesting is being around this space for some time now, is to see that it's constantly evolving. And so when you and I first connected, without doubt, the UK, London was the epicenter of fintech. It had no rivals. We're starting to see that change now. You mentioned Singapore before. It's a region where I think is a lot of exciting things happening. I guess in your kind of the journey that you've been on, Simon, and what you're seeing, and from your travels and talking to investors, is there a region, or is there say a kind of derivative sector of fintech that's got you excited right now?
Yeah, I think this sort of comes back to before the question that you sort of talked about. Where do I turn to? And this is a boring answer, and I apologise, Dexter, but I tend to focus on, when I talk about that grit and what we're doing, I tend to focus on our game and what we're doing. So, you mentioned last year how incredibly tough it was to raise money. We raised a fair bit of money just before our license came off. And I sort of came out of that a bit tired, and people saying, how on earth did you raise all that money when no one was raising money? I tend to shut those things out. And I think it's important to be able to shut those out. So unfortunately, I don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on around me, Dexter. I'm focused on Alex.Bank and what's going on there.
I'm actually happy with that answer, right? And I remember, and if you're listening to this, Alex Badrun at Spriggy, when I first met him, he and I, we kind of instantly hit it off and connected. And there was a documentary on at the time on Netflix about Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, Jimmy Iovine said exactly that. He said the reason most people fail is because they're distracted and they're looking. He said if you look at a racehorse, they put blinkers on it. And the reason why they put blinkers on is so it looks straight ahead and it can't see what's happening left or right.
That's right.
I think there's actually a really good lesson in that, which is actually, too often we're caught chasing the bright, shiny things, and you've only got to look at how 12 months ago everyone was Web3 crazy, and now those same people are Chat GPT, AI experts. And it's like, it's nonsense, right? This AI stuff and Chat GPT, it was happening 5 years back. It's only now that it's on Twitter that all of a sudden, hey, wow, it's amazing. So yeah, look, I'm actually really happy with that answer. It's probably a better answer than I was expecting.
Oh, that's terrific, but that's how we are, and I think that's one of our superpowers at Alex. We don't get caught up in the noise around us.
Yeah. So before we come to a wrap up, kind of what can we expect from Alex in 2023?
Yeah, I'm really excited about 2023. So as we started off, license restrictions are removed. We're out raising deposits at the moment. There's no problems in raising deposits. We're out match funding that with lending growth. And I think, it's a great time to be a bank, Dexter.
Yeah.
It's a tough time to be a non-bank lender, but it's a great time to be a bank. So we're out there writing good quality business and matching that with deposit gathering. We'll have some more products roll out through the year as well. Small business has always been an area that we want to focus on. Won't talk a lot about that now, but happy to catch up with you later in the year and talk a bit more about that if that's of interest.
Fantastic.
And that's sort of coming back to what we talked about before on the small business offering and solving some of the pain points you're experiencing yourself.
Oh, look, I think it's the biggest opportunity in Australia by far.
Absolutely. And then we will enter part of the mortgage market. And again, we do this very carefully, and we've learned a lot of lessons from both domestically and around the world on how people have entered that market. But we've got the challenge or the problem at the moment, Dexter, where most of our customers are customers of the Big Four, and they have so much enjoyed the Alex.Bank experience, they want to bring other banking to us.
Yeah.
So, we've got the challenge of how do we continue to offer our customers great experience that they're used to with Alex.Bank? So we think through some of that transactional banking and mortgages that will also help small business holders. So that's sort of on the radar for this year as well.
Fantastic. And on that note, where can people go and find out more about Alex.Bank and join up?
So obviously our website, and our website is Alex.Bank. We also have the usual socials, LinkedIn.
Awesome. We get some great talent listening to this show, and every week I get a story of how somebody's listened to it and reached out to somebody who's been on the podcast and ended up being hired. If anybody's listening to this and feels inspired by the Alex story and the legacy that you're building, what's the best way for them to find out about careers at Alex.Bank?
Yeah, so I think through LinkedIn, our head of HR, Kylie Vitale, is always looking for great talent. I think we've actually got some roles out there at the moment. We're looking for a treasurer, looking for another product manager, and I think we're always looking for great BDMs. So if you're interested, reach out to Kylie.
Simon, it's been fantastic to have this update with you. Just, amazed and kind of admire your grit and determination to do this, and the touch of insanity that you've brought with it as well to kind of keep going. Really excited to see what you've got in store this year.
The team we've got here, I know will do an awesome job when we solve that as well.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me, everybody. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter as always. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. And if you're new to the show, make sure you follow us and leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a subscribe and a like and a comment, because it really helps with the algorithm and connect fintech fans like yourself to find the show. Until the next episode, keep well. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you find world-class fintech leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.